In Focus is powered in part by Go Chevrolet at I-25 and the Boulder Turnpike. Your source for new or used cars and trucks, and reliable service for most makes and models. Just visit goautochevrolet.com.
Welcome to In Focus with Eden Lane.
The special summer exhibit at the Arvada Center Galleries, Faces, Places, and Spaces, comes to an end this weekend. So later we'll take a second look at our visit with the exhibition manager and the gallery coordinator. But we begin with a first look at the Equinox Theatre Company for their production of Stephen Sondheim's Assassins.
Assassins follows the story of 9 presidential assassins in history, all meeting at a time and place in order to tell their story and find their place in history.
Everybody's got the right to be happy. Don't feel bad, life's not as bad as it.
I think anytime in theater we're moved to consider someone else that we may not have even thought about their motivations before, it intrigues me and it makes an audience different when they leave the theater.
Everybody's got the right to be different.
If you wanna be
With the direct references to history, it's exciting to be able to do a piece that allows you to look at history and examine the way history has looked back on what has happened and look at the ways that we interpret the history and the way maybe history really kind of happened.
This is our first visit to the Equinox Theatre Company, and we were invited to attend one of their earliest rehearsals for Assassins. Here's my conversation with Timothy Kennedy, Pat Payne, and Adam Shelton. Well, I'm so glad that we were invited for our first visit to this theater company for this play this early in your rehearsal. Thank you for being brave enough to let us come in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
How did you choose to do Assassins?
Deb and Collin had mentioned to me that they were looking for shows to do, and I'm a huge Sondheim fan, and I know Equinox likes to do shows that maybe push the envelope a little bit and maybe are stuff that other theater companies may not want to tackle. And I pitched the idea of doing Assassins to them, and they loved the idea, and here we are.
What was it about Assassins, beside the fact that it's by Sondheim, that appealed to you so?
I love what the show says, and I love the fact that the show has real life people in it. It represents people in our history, and it's an examination of them from a different way than what society and history tells us.
And as the music director, what is it like to take the show that isn't as familiar to even Sondheim fans, because we don't get to see it very often? What is it like to tackle this score for you?
Well, it's a challenging score. The singers each have a lot of challenging rhythms. The Sondheim's always challenging melodically and harmonically, and so...
Is that his middle name? Stephen Challenging Sondheim?
Yeah, definitely.
seems to be.
And but what's wonderful is to discover the nuances. He always puts nuances in. In a lot of his scores, his nuances are in his lyrics. In Into the Woods, he plays a lot with his lyrics, and a lot of times there's metaphors or double meanings to a lot of the lyrics. In this piece, he does it through how he sneaks in music into the score. He puts in a patriotic tune where you wouldn't expect it, or just something that you'd recognize and go, I know that tune, and it's like, wait, that doesn't fit what's going on right now and what's being said. So he really challenges us to hear it in a different way by how he kind of plays with the music.
Because you get to play John Wilkes Booth, we'll leave it to you to explain a little bit about what this show is to those who may not be familiar with Assassins.
I would love to. Assassins, as Pat said, is a way for the public to understand the why to the most tragic points in our history as a country. And the book and certainly the music that goes along with it is an opportunity for these people, these characters, to tell the why in a way that's very human and in a way that is very true to whatever their purpose was
So what is
in
the
their
why
act.
for John Wilkes Booth?
The why for John Wilkes Booth is simpler than the why for many of the other characters, fortunately. But the why for John Wilkes Booth is the truth to his act, which was he was a patriot in his own sense and in his own mind, in the sense that he truly felt down to the core that Lincoln created the Civil War, which killed over 600,000 of his countrymen, both Northerners and Southerners, in a purposeless war. And he was very passionate about Lincoln being the initiator to that conflict. What's more, he felt like Lincoln, or he pointed to Lincoln's acts, for example, throwing those in the North who were against his ideals into prison without benefit of charge or trial, without benefit of constitutional rights of due process. I flippantly at the time called Booth history's first Clooney. He's the original George Clooney. He was this glorious actor, the biggest of the time. At the time, I believe he was making what would be the equivalent of $500,000 a year acting. A beautiful man, and also very passionate about politics and very passionate about social issues as he perceived them.
Do you obviously you've done a bit of digging into the character already, even though we're here this early in rehearsals. How are you finding him? How are you finding playing him? How are you finding your way into him in order to have some sort of empathy for him as a character?
At first, I thought it would be a challenge, obviously, for the obvious reason that he assassinated a president of the United States, and to wrap my mind as someone who just doesn't think like that, I thought would be the challenge. However, as I've read and studied more about Booth, I found him to be charming, and I can see the truths, the seeds of truth in his story, and I can see his perspective, which turned out to be not as big of a challenge as I thought it would be.
What's been the biggest challenge to playing him so far?
His passion. I feel like in order to do justice by this individual who did this horrific act, and I think we can all agree that it was a horrific act, whether or not it was justified, either his justification or someone else's. He was a man of incredible passion, and he was willing to give up his life for this one act, which he felt to his core was right and true and the just thing to do at that point in history.
He has a few moments where there's some difficult language in our time. How is that for you as an actor to know you're going to have to sing that in front of audiences?
It's a challenge. And
How did it feel the first time you had to do it in front of your cast, for example?
I think as an actor, you have to have abandon. And I think as an actor, we have to let go of how others are going to perceive us in order to do justice to the script, to the music, to the role, and now to the individual, the real human. And for me, I just needed to let go. And I understand that people will react strongly to some of the language, and certainly they should react strongly to the subject matter,
Right.
especially here in Colorado, and given the times that we're in currently, it's a very intense subject matter. But
That's something theater is able to do differently than any other medium of art, in that the audience is actually joining you. When you picked this, you couldn't have foreseen the climate that we're in now.
Yeah.
But knowing that we're in this climate now, how are you helping your cast deal with the very issues that Adam's talking
Well,
about?
we actually spoke about it at rehearsal the other night after it happened. I wanted to take a moment and discuss what had happened and how in regards to the show. And, you know, I sat down the script for a few days and didn't work on it and just kind of dealt with what has happened in our world. And then picked it back up, and I realized when I picked it back up that it's as important now as ever to talk about the whys. And the idea of these men and women that did this act, and the way this show examines them from a different point of view and forces the audience to, I mean, almost in a weird way, like become compassionate, but also looks at history in a different light. For example, as Adam said, John Wilkes Booth was a very famous actor of his day. He was the best looking, he was everything. History books don't tell us that. History books glorify Booth to be a out of work actor, a bad person, et cetera, et cetera.
It makes it easier to deal with.
The honesty was he wasn't. And, you know, the hope is that we can take this show that talks about these monsters, and as a society, it's so easy for us to just put them in a corner and say, all these guys are crazy. And what I think Mr. Sondheim is saying with Assassins is, wait a sec, they have a story too.
So who are some of the other stories we see?
Sam Bick, who attempted to assassinate Richard Nixon, John Hinckley, who tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan, Giuseppe Zingara, Charles J. Cateau, and then Squeaky Fromm of the Manson family, who attempted on Gerald Ford. Who else am I missing?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Of course, Lee Harvey Oswald.
say Czolgosz.
Leon Czolgosz, who assassinated McKinley.
So when we think of these various points in history and these various killings, these various assassinations, how do you weave that together in one narrative, and how do you weave it together musically?
Well, I think Sondheim does that brilliantly. He represents each of the characters musically through both what they stood for, so he musically captures what they stood for and their passion for what they stood for, which I always feel speaking something is passionate, but singing something adds so much more to it. And so he really represents their heart and their truth in that way musically. But then he also represents the other side, how they affected the country. There's this beautiful piece, Something Just Broke, that is right after Kennedy is assassinated, and how it affected every person. Just like what's happened recently, even if you weren't close to anyone that it was affected by, you're still affected by the news of that it happened. And so I think he also tells the story of the people who had to live with the actions of these people as equally as he does the people who did the act.
So when we started, you talked about the message of this show. What is it?
The message of this show is that everybody has the right to the American dream. On the poster, we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. However, where it says the pursuit, it's crossed out. And the idea behind that is that the assassins believe in those things, but they don't necessarily believe in the pursuit. They might believe that it should be given to them in the way of Czolgosz and some of the Booth and some of the political ones, and others just wanted to take it. I asked each assassin what their reason was for doing it, and it varies, but at the end of the day, they really just want a place in history. On our stage, these assassins are all saying, we want a place in history. And there's a character that's the balladeer, and he's kind of the storyteller. And to me, he kind of represents the audience's conscience. He kind of represents what we, the audience, are thinking. And I don't want to give away the show for your viewers that don't know it, but that makes the ending even more chilling, I think. And then the proprietor, who's another character in the show, to me kind of represents that which the assassins believe the American dream is, kind of the grosser things of greed and corruption and that kind of thing. And it's kind of those two forces at battle, and these assassins kind of telling their story to the audience and basically asking for judgment, if you will, from the audience.
So the judgment isn't in the script.
No, it is very much for the audience to take home with them.
it's challenging to always present it that way, especially if it's a real life incident that you've learned about from elementary school on. How do you prevent from having your own judgment, or do you have your own judgment about these people and whether they're insane or?
It's very important to me that nearly none of the assassins on stage are crazy, because somewhere in their psyche, they, for themselves, in their heart and soul, thought they were doing the right thing. I think you could argue maybe one or two of them was probably crazy, but in the world of theater and in the world of our show, it makes for a much more interesting night of theater if the people that are on stage portraying these characters are passionate, as Adam said, about their belief and what it is that they want.
It's a very different angle than whether or not you're presenting it as history or as fact, and you're commenting on it as a piece of theater.
And there's characters who comment in the show on certain things that happen. The balladeer, the connection to the audience, does comment at times. He says Booth was off his head at a moment in the show, but I think he says what we're thinking. It's sitting in the audience. Oh, he shot somebody, he's off his head. And then Booth forces us to look deeper.
Well, it's a brave choice you've made to do this show even before the climate exists that we're living in now. And I'm so glad that it was our first visit with this company to join you along this journey as you're doing something so brave, and the fact that you've stayed with it even though we're in this climate tells me how committed you are to your art, and I'm so delighted to meet you. Thank you for making the time for me.
Thank you so much.
Equinox Theatre Company's production of Stephen Sondheim's Assassins plays at the Bug Theatre. Visit equinoxtheatredenver.com for ticket information. And now a second look at a special segment produced entirely on the iPhone. We used a DIY stabilizing rig inspired by the frugal filmmaker. We used these techniques in honor of the new exhibit, Faces, Places, and Spaces. The Arvada Center is enhancing this exhibit with augmented reality. We begin this special look with Gallery Exhibition Manager Collin Parson. It's really gratifying to be here and seeing everybody filtering in before the shows and at lunchtime to look at this exhibit. This particular exhibit you've designed is really quite special. Tell me how this came about.
Well, we usually try to organize shows starting with this gallery and then moving our ways up, but actually we started with the theater gallery, so the spaces component, and then we wanted to do a portrait show, but not a traditional portrait show. And then that's where Faces, Places, and Spaces came about. So we did this portrait show in a non-traditional sense. So we wanted all different medias, different styles, and different sizes.
And the subject matter, some of them are actually local people that are in the Coloradans that are in these pieces.
Not only we have 37 artists in the whole series, and I would say about 30 of the artists are actually from Colorado, but some of the subject matter, especially Sharon Brown's The Creator series, feature creators of Colorado art scene, the writers, musicians, dancers, performers, artists, etc.
So the exhibit in itself, especially her component, is like a slice of the Arvada Center because there's all of those things going on here.
Well, and that's what's great working at the Arvada Center is you're walking down the hallway, you see Brian Mulgrave, the scenic designer for the performing arts. You see costume designers, you see instructors, educators, teaching art and promoting art, and it's a very
and it's always crawling with musicians and dancers no matter when you come here.
No matter where you go. And as a gallery guy, sometimes those dancers get a little too close to the art, but it's really great, and it's what makes the Arvada Center a special place.
So you say out of 37 artists represented in this exhibit, 30 of them are from Colorado.
Yeah, approximately.
How did you find them?
Well, I'm an artist, and that's part of my job as a curator is knowing the Denver, Colorado arts community. And it really starts off with, okay, Sharon Brown, we have 30 of her pieces. What would go great with that? Oh, well, I have my connections with Sharks Inc. and Lions, Master Printer, and they gave Hung Lu, who's actually from Oakland, but they recommended, oh, here's an artist you should look into. So a lot of times it's specific artists that I look for, and other times it evolves into artists that I never thought would be here, but now are. So.
What was the biggest surprise as you curated this show?
The scale. We have quite a lot of pieces. And a lot of the quality and of the artists, I had to work with local commercial galleries to get the rights to use these pieces and the artists. So I think
Does that mean some of them are for sale?
Oh, almost all of these are for sale.
Oh, wow.
Yes, a lot of times our work is for sale unless it says otherwise, like collection of. But one of the artists that I didn't think I would even have a shot was Noah Kalina, who's the video artist in the show, and I really wanted a video in this in the exhibition, and I found him online. It had 22 million hits, and I was like, man, that would be great. How can I get a hold of this guy? And right at the end of the video, it said Noah Kalina at .com or whatever. And
He was smart enough to tag his branding.
yes, and I sent him just a nice email explaining what the Arvada Center is, what the show's about, and next I knew, I got a DVD in the mail and said, go for it. So it was really great. So,
Well, when we were here for the reception, it was my first chance to sort of take it all in. And I've had to walk through a few more times because it is so grand, as you said, the scale, but each of the pieces, even those that are quite large, they're very intimate.
yeah, and I think that's something to do with maybe the subject matter of the face, the personal.
But even the spaces and places one feels intimate. How did you do that?
A lot of it is just making sure we have enough wall space for these size pieces. I'm a huge fan of making sure each piece gets the space that is needed and required, and it's just a lot of pre-planning that goes on in that. And obviously, things change when you actually get the piece, because even though that you get the dimensions, you're like, oh, that's bigger than I thought, or that's smaller. But that's the challenge of my job.
Even though the physical size of the piece can be exactly what you expected, when you see it in context, it has a different impact.
Exactly. And like Sharon Brown's large installation down here, that actually was as large as I thought it would be, but it was still quite powerful. It had the effect that I was hoping.
When you stand back in the middle of that open space and see it, it begs you to get closer and closer to examine each component of it.
Yeah, and that's what's great is it reads as an installation, yet they could each be seen as individual creators. And that's what's great about the series of exhibitions is it could be one show, faces, places, and spaces, or it could be separate shows that each hold their own.
Well, I always love the exhibits here. I always find something to really take with me and have an impact. But this one in particular is really very, very special. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Could have not done it with help without the Arvada Center, and we're proud of it, and come check it out. So, thank you.
Thanks.
The augmented reality component of these new exhibits is a new program for the Arvada Center. So we get more details from Kristin Bueb.
For this exhibition, we implemented a new technology called augmented reality, and the app is called LAYAR, so it's kind of that play on layer. And basically what it is any Apple or Android smart device, what we've done is programmed certain information on top of these paintings or photographs or what have you, so that when you scan it with your smart device, it'll bring up information automatically about those artists. We've linked to video interviews, websites, articles, what have you, whatever was basically available about the artists out there in the digital world. And so it just gives the visitors a new way to interact with the artists, find out more information, and we hope it allows them something to do and spend more time in the galleries and kind of establish the galleries as a place to be.
Linger.
So, yes, yeah.
Now that inspired us to sort of do this entire segment using smartphone technology as well. It's amazing how that's sort of reaching out tentacles to all aspects of our life, including the arts.
Yes.
What's been the feedback from the short time it's been up from people who are taking advantage of it?
I think people really love it. We did our staff tests and we've done our friend tests. When we see someone we know come in, we make sure they try it. And
everyone's trying it out during the reception too.
Yes, exactly, and everyone loves it. It's just something fun to do, and it's not just, oh, look at the art, move on to the next painting. It's look at the art, oh, what can I learn?
And it's not just scanning it and taking you to a website. As you said, there's so many different multimedia components that it's bringing in.
Exactly. We can link to almost anything, and then, we have little fun facts about all the artists, so, you get to learn something that maybe you wouldn't in a typical article or anything like that.
Do we still have the traditional audio tour available that we've come to expect at the Arvada Center?
We do. We have that as well, and we've kind of streamlined our labels to make it, accessible. You can find them both on there. And of course, the audio tour is dependent on the artist if they feel comfortable doing that or not, but we do still have that as an option. And I think, about maybe half of our artists have done it for this exhibition. So, and some of them are hilarious and some of them are really informative. So,
what's the biggest lesson learned trying to implement this for the first time on such a huge scale?
I think, just be ready to expect anything, from, a few hours before the opening having technical difficulties and just being like, well,
of course,
because it's technology. But, and I think just be prepared for anything, really.
Do you think you'll do this again in other exhibits?
Oh, definitely. It's something that just is a great resource. And hopefully we'll just create this new relationship with patrons that, the Arvada Center is a fun and exciting place to be, and there's always something different to
and
explore.
Also make it more vital, more tangible for younger, more tech, not just savvy, but tech integrated visitors.
Definitely. Yeah, and there's one piece in the show, Adam Milner, his piece is entirely focused around Facebook. And so, his is linked directly to his Facebook and, just how all these different facets of the digital world are coming together through this technology.
Faces, Places, and Spaces ends its run at the Arvada Center Galleries this weekend. Make sure you walk through when you attend any performance at the Arvada Center or make a special trip. Visit arvadacenter.org for more information. While summer isn't over yet, we're already working on Season 5. Here's a sneak peek at our visit to the third rehearsal for Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson. Don't wait for our interview. Visit bloodydenver.com for ticket information.
That's all for this edition. Remember to join us on Facebook and Twitter. With all that Colorado has to offer, we're here to help you keep it in focus. Thanks for watching. Good night.